Late one night while driving along a deserted road, my car suddenly shuddered and I came to a halt. Panic set in as I realized that I was stranded in the darkness, far away from any immediate help. I assessed the situation and decided to walk to the nearest gas station, which was several miles away. The night was eerie, with an occasional gust of wind rustling through the trees, and the dim glow of the moon casting faint shadows on the road. As I approached the small gas station, I couldn't help but notice its worn-out appearance. The flickering fluorescent lights gave the surroundings an eerie atmosphere, and the silence was broken only by the sound of distant crickets. Inside the store, I found a tired attendant behind the counter. His worn expression and the sparse number of customers added to the quiet ambience. I explained my situation and he kindly offered to take a look at my car. We ventured outside and the night air felt heavy with anticipation. The attendant skillfully inspected the engine, diagnosing the issue. As he worked, though, a sense of unease washed over me, as if someone or something was watching us from the shadows. A sudden gust of wind made the trees sway and I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. My senses heightened and every sound seemed to echo through the night. But we persisted, determined to fix the car and get back on the road. Just as the attendant was about to finish his repairs, a distant scream shattered the stillness. We froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Without hesitation, we followed the sound, our instincts urging us to help. As we approached the source of the scream, the air grew thick with tension. All of a sudden, the scream sounded like it was coming towards us, and we met head-on with a young woman that seemed like she was running for her life. Her fear was palpable. We tried to ask her what was wrong, but it didn't seem like she had any time to answer questions. So we hurried our way back to the gas station, seeking some form of shelter versus being out in the open. We ended up calling the police, and we later learned that the woman was running away from a boyfriend of sort. They had lived back off the road, kind of in the middle of nowhere, so that's where she came running from. With that settled, hours later a tow truck arrived to assist with my car, and I later continued my journey with a renewed appreciation for the mysteries that lie hidden in the night. That experience is forever etched in my memory, a reminder that even the most ordinary of situations, there can be moments of inexplicable strangeness that defy explanation. This happened back in December when I was home for Christmas break. I found myself seeking solace in the dimly lit ambience of a local bar. I had been out with my friends earlier, but they had all called it quits for the night, so I was hanging around for a nightcap. The neon signs flickered, casting an otherworldly glow upon the patrons. It was then that I noticed him. The bartender, an enigmatic figure with a penetrating gaze that seemed to pierce through the facade of every customer. I took a seat at the bar, drawn to the mysterious aura surrounding him. As he prepared my drink, his movements were swift and deliberate, like a master of his craft. His eyes never left mine, as if he could see into the depths of my soul. Conversation flowed effortlessly between us. He spoke of odd things and the casual story about nights working, but then he whispered things that made me soon take a turn and left me unsettling and an unease lingering in the air. Yet despite the growing discomfort, a morbid curiosity kept me engaged in his stories. Hours had passed and the bar had emptied, leaving only the two of us. It was then that he made an unexpected offer to accompany me home, as if drawn to something within me. A shiver crawled down my spine, but my curiosity overruled my instincts. As we stepped out into the cool night air, the atmosphere had shifted. Shadows danced along the streets, concealing secrets that sent chills down my spine. The bartender's presence felt suffocating, his gaze intense and unwavering. Navigating through dimly lit alleyways, I became increasingly aware of his unsettling proximity. Every turn I made, he mirrored, his presence growing more invasive with each step. The once familiar path became an unfamiliar labyrinth, trapping me in an ever-tightening grip. Fear took hold of my senses, urging me to escape from this encounter. I quickened my pace, desperate to distance myself from the relentless presence that trailed closely behind. Panic set in as I realized that I was being followed by a stranger whose intentions remained a mystery, but were now coming to the surface. With each passing moment, the world around me seemed to distort, as if reality itself were unraveling. The streets grew desolate, devoid of any sign of life. An overwhelming sense of isolation permeated the air, and a sense of impending doom pressed in upon me. Finally reaching my home, I fumbled for my keys, a sense of dread weighing heavily upon my heart. As the door swung open, the bartender's presence lingered just behind me. His voice, sounding sinister, cut through the silence, revealing a dark intention that I had not initially anticipated. Terrified, I slammed the door shut, locking out the enigma that had invaded my life. I stumbled backward, my mind racing with questions and the chilling realization that I had invited this horrible person into my world. Every night after that, I lived in fear, the memories coming to the surface of my encounter. Every creak around the house or the whisper of the wind, it carried his presence, lingering just beyond. It was a constant reminder that some encounters, no matter how intriguing or innocent they may seem, carry consequences that can never be undone. As time passed, though, I sought solace in the belief that the encounter had been nothing more than a twisted figment in my imagination, that I had simply blown it out of proportion. But in all reality, I am one of the lucky ones that got out physically unscathed. It really could have been much worse. Since that night, I haven't seen the man, but also, I haven't gone back to that bar. Don't think I ever will. This happened in the summer of 2010, when I was just entering my teenage years. My family took a trip to a really nice hotel in the city. I can't really remember why we decided to take the trip, but I remember a lot of family friends coming with and staying in adjacent rooms. I've never asked my parents, and it's not really important to the story. To preface, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat and always have been. I'm a pretty skinny, fragile kid, so I get spooked pretty easily, even now. This, however, was almost definitely not me freaking myself out like I normally did. Looking back, I'm incredibly lucky I trusted my instincts. This hotel had a strange design to it. The lobby was actually on the 4th floor, not the bottom floor, which I found strange. To access the lobby, you had to use the elevator. There was no way for you to get to it from the stairs. This information would have been nice before everything happened, as you'll find out. The hotel was organized in a square shape. Every floor was lined with a balcony, and you could look down into the lobby and cafe area from your floor. Essentially, if you are walking to your room, you could be seen from anyone that was on your floor if they just stepped out of the room and looked around. I was always afraid I would fall over the balcony and sail down 8 stories to my death, but they were high enough to a point where I wasn't concerned for my safety. The first day was nice. My friends and I hung out and played cards all day, or we watched whatever was on TV. At night, we would explore the halls of the hotel and tell each other ghost stories. It was a really fun time, even though I didn't fully understand why we were there. On the 3rd day, though, things got strange fast. I woke up to the sound of screaming coming from outside my door. Now, because of the hotel's design I mentioned, sounds from the lobby would echo all the way up to the top of the building. So when I walked outside to investigate, I immediately looked over the balcony to see what the commotion was about. I saw a girl laying on the ground, eggs and milk splattered everywhere around her. And people were rushing to help her, and I heard a couple people telling each other to call 911. It seemed like the girl was unconscious. Maybe she had passed out or something. I scanned the lobby and saw that my family and a couple of my friends were in the lobby getting breakfast, all staring at the event in front of them. I decided that I would rush down to meet them to find out what had happened. The elevator was on the opposite side of my floor, so I took the stairwell located right next to my room. We were on the 7th or 8th floor, so I knew I only had to take about 4 flights down. Not a big deal. I descended for a little while, looking for the number 4 on the wall or the letter L. I passed floor 5, ready to find a door to the lobby. I took about 2 more flights of steps before realizing that there hadn't been a door for the 4th floor, nor had there been a door for the 3rd or 2nd. Now at this point, I probably should have turned back, but I continued down because I was tired and I didn't want to climb back up. There were some weird side hallways that went into pitch black areas with a bunch of piping and wiring, and though I was curious to explore, I passed them by. I quickly hit the bottom floor, a dimly lit and cold room with cinder block walls and concrete flooring. In front of me was a set of double doors. I hesitated at first, but I assumed that this was just another way to get back to the lobby, so I opened them and entered. Behind the doors was a massive warehouse-type room, probably the size of a smaller basketball stadium. The only light coming in was from the stairwell behind me, so I wasn't really able to see much. Stairs were stacked and covered in plastic, tables lined the wall, and in the distance, I thought I could see boxes stacked in line against the wall as well. It was probably the storage room of the hotel. I looked around and saw an elevator in the back of the room, so I made my way towards it. I closed the door to the stairwell and began to walk in the dim light. The room was super muggy and dusty, and it seemed like nobody had been down there for a long time. As I got closer to the elevator, I noticed it was a little bigger than the elevators in the lobby and other floors. I pressed the up button, but got no response. There was a card swiper next to the button. It must have been for employees only, I thought, and I turned back towards the stairwell doors, making my way past the chairs and tables along the wall. When I got to the door, I gave it a tug. Locked, of course. This is when things started to hit me, and I realized that I was stuck in the dark, dusty basement of a hotel. I didn't have a phone because my parents wouldn't let me get one until I graduated middle school, so I couldn't call anyone. Everyone likely assumed I was still asleep in the room, so I began freaking out, believing that nobody was going to look for me. I searched around the warehouse, looking for other ways out. Some areas of the place were better lit than others, so I looked around in areas that I could see first before starting on the darker side of the room. There was one other set of doors that I found, but it happened to be locked as well. I began to cry, scared that nobody would ever find me in this basement. I swear that it felt like hours, but I think only a handful of minutes passed before the door creaked open. It wasn't the door from the stairwell, rather the second door that I had found. A slim, middle-aged man in a lab coat came out of the doors. Now, if this was a 21-year-old me seeing this, I would be very confused as to why this guy was wearing a lab coat in a hotel. I was only 12 or 13 at the time, so I was immediately relieved at the sight of an adult who looked smart. I approached him, tears in my eyes, and he immediately looked surprised to see me, as you would expect. "What are you doing down here?" he yelled. "I got lost on my way down to the lobby and I've been locked in here. Do you have a key?" I was shaking, eager to get out of there. He didn't answer my key question, and instead he said, "I know a way out of here, follow me." He began to walk towards the doors with the stairwell, and I followed, relieved that someone had finally come to save me. We approached the doors, and I began to reach for the handle, but he continued walking. "Isn't it right here?" I asked him. I'll never forget the look in his face when I said that. He looked nervous, and though it was dim, I could see sweat glistening from his forehead and behind his glasses. "No, this way," he said sternly. I continued to follow him, but I was now nervous myself. We had passed the door to the stairs, and we were now headed towards a darker side of the basement, away from the elevators. He looked like he had no clue where he was leading me, as he kept checking around him, almost as if he was taking in his surroundings for the first time. We turned a corner and began walking towards the boxes, a dead end. I immediately froze, realizing that something was very, very wrong. This guy had no idea where he was going, nor did he appear to work at the hotel. I said, my voice shaking, "Okay, where are we going?" He turned and said, "This way, just follow me." I knew that there were no doors by those boxes. I had checked there first after I had found out the stairwell door was locked. I wanted to thank whatever God is up there for gifting me with the idea that I had next. I started yelling as loud as I could. I yelled so loud that I gave myself a headache. The man, irritated and plugging his ears, began yelling back at me, "What are you doing? Be quiet." I continued to yell. I don't even remember how long I was yelling. Finally, the man snapped and began quickly walking towards me. I went in a full sprint towards the stairwell doors, hoping to God they would somehow be magically open. He didn't run after me. He walked sternly behind me, muttering things like "stupid" and other kind of compliments. I was about 5 feet from the door when somebody burst through, my savior, a hotel janitor who had heard the screaming from the stairwell. He saw the situation, me and some random guy in a lab coat in a locked basement, and immediately told me to get behind him. The janitor asked me who the man was, and I said I had no idea, that he had come in through the door on the other side of the room, and I pointed to the door. The janitor quickly radioed into the desk that he had found a child in the basement, and quietly so that I wouldn't hear, he said, "This man came from outside, get security," or something like that. The man in the lab coat started trying to argue with the janitor, claiming that he was simply looking for a bathroom. The janitor clearly wasn't buying it, and he kept saying things like, "Wait till security gets here and talk to them about it." I was standing beside him the whole time, trying to take in what was happening, confused out of my mind. Eventually, an employee from the front desk arrived and took me back to the steps of the lobby, where I met with my family, who surprisingly had no idea I was missing. I told them the story, crying and shaking, and they hugged me tightly, thanking the employee over and over again for their help. I never got to thank that janitor though. Looking back now, I have absolutely no clue what that man was doing in the basement. I don't have any information as to what happens afterwards or who he was. I know for a fact that the incident with the girl in the lobby was unrelated. Something about low blood sugar. Not sure. I've thought about that day a lot, and the only explanation I can put together is that the door that I had found in the basement lead to the streets of the city, where he must have wandered from. I have no clue what his intentions were, why he was wearing the lab coat, or why he chose to pretend to know a way out. To be frank, this could have just been a huge misunderstanding of some sort, and I just chose a really bad time to get lost. But all I know for sure is if I hadn't screamed my lungs out, I might not have been telling this story the same way, or at all. So, a strange man in a lab coat wandering around a dark, dusty hotel basement. Let's not meet.